Welcome to REST, which stands for Resiliency and Empowerment Seminar today. I am your host, Susan Gans, and I am the founder and strategic advisor with Gans Strategic Solutions, where I work with companies at the intersection of business and human behavior. This show is about shedding a light on leaders of small and mid-sized businesses, heads of nonprofits, and other community leaders. We hear their journeys and we hear about how they're being resilient during these very challenging times. I'm so delighted today to have Julia Arndt. Julia is the founder of the Peak Performance Method, which is a unique model combining critical productivity, mindfulness, and leadership tools to help forward-thinking individuals and organizations develop the next workplace superpower through scalable programs. In addition to writing her first book, which we're excited to hear about, Julia is a stress management trainer, international speaker, and the host of her own podcast called Stressed that has over 25,000 podcast downloads globally as of this date. Julia originally hails from Germany and has lived in 5 countries over the last 12 years and speaks 3 languages fluently. After working at Google in Silicon Valley for 7.5 years, while the company grew from 30,000 to 100,000 employees, Julia's been running her own consulting and coaching businesses. And she's worked with Google and Uber to understand the effects of stress on the body and mind, to move beyond burnout, and to build a mindful lifestyle to deliver focused, high energy, and productivity. And her motto, which I love, is if your brain is your most valuable resource, let's make sure to take care of it. Your career success and satisfaction depends on your ability to develop the next workplace superpower. And with that, we welcome Julia.
Thank you so much for the introduction. That's really, really wonderful. Thank you so much. Hi, Susan. Nice to be here.
Thanks for being here today. We were introduced by a mutual Google friends, and I'm so excited to hear about your journey. So let's jump in. Take us back to the earlier part of your career where you started to work for Google, and then you decided to become an entrepreneur. So take us through that journey.
Yeah, okay. Let's start with that. So I think you gave already a wonderful introduction. So there's not really much to be said, except maybe when I started at Google, that was in October 2011. And I started as an account manager for the German-speaking market, so for Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, and stayed in Dublin in Ireland for 3 years. And then I moved over to Silicon Valley in California in September 2014. So it's almost 6 years ago now. Time is truly flying by. And yeah, I've had different roles at Google. When I moved to Mountain View, I was a project and program manager in different roles in the sales and support org within Google Ads. And, you know, as everybody probably imagines, it was a pretty stressful job. And, you know, and I think there's always 2 things that we have to think about when we're talking about stress. I think there's always a professional component and there's always a personal component. No matter if you have a family or you are having a big commute because maybe you're living in 2 different places, or you have a partner that lives in a different place, there's always a professional and a personal component to our stress level. So for me personally, that was the same thing too. So I had a challenging job as a project manager. We're definitely having a lot of things to do, and it's always really go, 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 because it's really short deadlines and timelines. And then in a short period of time, we have to get a lot of things done. So that means a lot of work. And of course, working for a global company, also meaning a lot of global meetings and global connections. So working late, working in the evenings, working during the weekends, all these different things are unfortunately kind of a normal life when working for a tech giant. And personally, I fell in love with Lake Tahoe. So I lived in Silicon Valley, but very early on. So I moved to the US in 2014, and then early 2015, I came to Tahoe for the first time and completely fell in love with it, totally unexpectedly. I come from a really small town in Germany, and I've never lived in the mountains, but I came here, and it really connected. I just connected with me on a very different level, maybe as well because Silicon Valley is super stressful, and I'm a more introverted person in my own personal life, even though I do speak in front of hundreds of people and I do enjoy that. I am an introvert on a personal level. So I really enjoyed coming to Tahoe, fell in love with this place, decided to buy a small house in 2016. And with that, of course, started a regular weekly commute of 10 hours. So 5 hours to come here, 5 hours to go back every Thursday night. Working from home for a day on Fridays and then driving back on Sunday nights. And initially that was all super exciting and really fun. And I thought I was the luckiest person in the world because I had the best of both worlds, right? I was working in Silicon Valley, had a really safe, really wonderful job. And at the same time lived my weekends the way I wanted to live them in a place that I really felt connected with. And then of course, with those things, oftentimes also comes a partnership. So I met my fiance in 2016 as well. And of course, made me come and drive on an even more regular basis because he's based out of Lake Tahoe. And I think one of the interesting things for me on this journey was that I've always been a very physically active and health conscious person. So I was always really interested in wellness and well-being programs. I did a gym instructor certification in my early years when I started at Google. I have a 400-hour yoga teacher training certification. And I also did an evening diploma in sports psychology just because I was interested, because I really enjoyed it. And I loved physical activity. That's what I did a lot, in my hobby and in my free time. But I was not really aware of my mental health until it started to not be very healthy anymore. So what I mean with that is that in 2018, so almost 2 years ago now, I started to be really overwhelmed. And it didn't start in 2018. I think it was a product of just my lifestyle since 2015, 2016, with a commute, busy work, different changes and challenges, of course, at work as well, reorganizations, changing a job internally, joining a new team, having new team members globally, all these different kinds of things. And over the course, I would say, of 2 to 3 years leading up until 2018, I slowly started to change my habits. I skipped my gym sessions because I felt so mentally exhausted in the evenings that I just wanted to be home. I just wanted to be a couch potato, sit on the couch, eat my food, and not really listen or do anything anymore. I started to eat more unhealthy foods that was a result of that as well. I wasn't as active anymore, ate maybe more sugary foods, drank more coffee. And I started to feel very anxious without knowing at the time that I felt anxious. I just knew that something was going on, which led up until 2018, where I felt so burned out and exhausted and overwhelmed with my whole life that I decided to go to a doctor. And they gave me a couple of different result tests, and they asked me to fill them out. And when I met the doctor, she said to me, "You have anxiety and depression." And that was really eye-opening and surprising to me at the time, because I considered myself as such an active and healthy person. So all of a sudden being diagnosed with a mental health issue was not something that I expected. And so, and that's really where I started to be super, super interested in mental health, stress management, the neuroscience of, negative self-talk, all these different kinds of things. And so I learned a lot. I was on a 3-month medical leave in 2018 because of my mental health issue, and used the time to learn a lot about myself and about what mental health really means. Yeah. Do you want me to continue?
No, we can take a breath. I really appreciate you sharing very authentically your story. It's very real. I think sometimes when we get onto the treadmill, so to speak, of I can do this, I can take on these challenges, and then I can live the life I want on the weekends and commute, and it's all good until it's not all good.
Mm-hmm.
And the I guess the wake up call for you is when you start to realize, like, wait a second, I'm not going to the gym. Wait a second, I'm not eating the way that I want to. And let me get an outside point of view
Yeah.
to see what's going on with me. Now, not everybody would take that step. So I honor you for taking those
Mm,
steps.
thanks.
So let's talk about self-care. So now what does self-care look like for you, and how has that now become the driver of your entrepreneurial venture?
Mm-hmm. Oh, great question. I want to add one thing to what you just said, because you're doing a very great job at kind of reflecting of what I just said, and it made me realize that, of course, with skipping the gym sessions and eating more unhealthy, there was also a component that I didn't talk about, which was more of these negative thoughts, right? So I got into the
Um,
spiral of thinking, oh my god, what am I doing? Like, it's just like constantly these like negative thoughts of, I'm not happy, I don't know what I'm doing, I feel anxious. I didn't know that the anxious was the feeling that I was feeling, but I constantly felt really nervous. I had this feeling in my stomach all the time, because I had to commute. I was commuting on my own all the time. I was commuting late at night. I had a couple of situations where I almost got into an accident, so that created that nervosity and stress even during that drive every week as well, right? So that just kind of all of these feelings accumulated as well. So at the end, and the reason actually why I went to the doctor was that at the end I literally started to have thoughts around, I wish something would happen to me, I wish I don't have to go back to work anymore and try and do that drive, I wish I would cut myself, or like, not really suicidal thoughts, but definitely a little bit more self-destructive thoughts. And that was when I was thinking, okay, something is not really right here anymore. And I want to be so open about this, because I think a lot of us have these thoughts, but we don't share them because we think that we are crazy, or we don't really know, maybe we ignore those thoughts. So I think it's really important to mention that it's normal that we're having these thoughts. The more stress we have, the more pressure we put on our nervous system, the more um the more our mental health really is suffering, our physical health, but specifically our mental health. And that's why I went to the doctor. I actually decided to not take any medication. So, of course, I had this conversation with the doctor, and she's like, well, do you want me to prescribe you anti-anxiety medicine, antidepressants? And I said, no, I don't want that, because there's obviously a reason why I've gotten to the point where I am today. And I feel like if you're just giving me medication, I'm going back to being a happy person, but it doesn't really resolve the root. So I really used those 3 months on my medical leave to practice self-care. So to go into kind of your next question,
yes.
because I was like, okay, something that I did was obviously not really good for me. So how can I start shifting back into more healthier habits and routines? And I think the biggest, I always talk about this, and it sounds very simple, but it's probably one of the biggest changes that I've done for myself that had a tremendous effect on me, was I started to build new habits. And one of them was a new morning routine. So I'm sure a lot of people can relate when I say, oh, well, I always got up and I woke up in the morning, and the first thing that I did was I rolled over to my bedside table, took my phone, and then started my day with checking all of the different notifications, messages, and emails that I had received overnight, because I worked for a very global organization. My family is in Germany. A lot of my friends and connections are all over the world, right? So I always have had a lot of notifications overnight. And that's how I started my day. And what I realized when I created this new morning routine was that I immediately started my morning with giving out energy to other people and switching on my brain to all of the things that I have to do throughout the day, right? So it was immediately like hassle, like, thinking about a million different things. Then I would go maybe take a shower, but during the shower, I would already be so consumed with my thoughts of all of the things that I have to get done, that I didn't really take care of myself. So I changed my morning routine in October 2018 to being really, really strict with myself to not check my phone for the first 60 to 90 minutes in the morning, and spending those 60 to 90 minutes for myself. So how that looks for me today, move forward 18 months almost now, I actually integrated some exercise and activity into my morning routine. So every morning now I go for a 15 to 20-minute run. There's no expectation from my side on how long that run is. As long as I step my foot outside the door, I'm very happy. Because I'm not a morning person, I'm not a runner, but I wanted to integrate some activity into my life, because just like many people, I am sitting at my desk all day long and I'm not moving enough. And that has a tremendous effect on my productivity and focus. And so I go for a run, I come home, I make my bed, I take a shower, I get ready for work, even though I'm working from home and I'm building my own business. I have a glass of lemon water and a tea, and I'm writing in my journal. So usually I'm writing about things that are on my mind. I'm writing about the things that I did maybe the previous day. And I always end my journal entry with 3 things that I feel grateful for. Because one of the things that I realized was that the quality of my thoughts was not very positive. And I really wanted to shift that focus, because I had learned that it's really important to shift the focus from thinking so negatively and being so critical about our own life all the time to being more positive. And it's made a really tremendous difference in my life. I feel like now when, I'm faced with a challenging situation, because I have trained my brain to think more positively, I can always see kind of the good thing in a difficult or challenging situation. And I even got my grandma, who's 86, almost 87 years old now, to start journaling and doing a gratitude practice, almost at the same time as I started, because she was also going through a hard time. She was just about to have back surgery. And I said to her, well, grandma, you really need to take care of your thoughts, and you need to start thinking more positive thoughts. And she's still doing it. So even after 1.5 years, she has also understood and really connected with that positivity and with the power that is behind that, which I think is so wonderful, makes me so happy. So every year now for Christmas, I'm giving her a new journal, and because she asks me, because she's like, my journal is full and I want to continue this. So it's really beautiful. And, on top of all of that, she said to me that one day when she's not in the world anymore, she's going to inherit me her diaries. So it's just a really beautiful way to connect with people as well. So yeah, so that's a very long answer to self-care, but that's just one of the things that I implemented. And actually you asked me then, how did I bring that into my business as well, right? So self-care. So that's kind of how everything started. It started with self-care. It started with stress management. It started with really understanding what's happening in my body on the physiological and psychological level when I am experiencing stress. And a lot at the beginning, I talked in my programs about self-care, routines, values. I talked about that stress management is not just about yoga and meditation, because a lot of people always think that. But one of my first initial goals was, I want people to understand that in order to manage their stress, that's not the only thing that they can do. But then through my work over the last 1.5 years now, I've trained over 2,500 people to this point, especially since the coronavirus crisis started. I've trained 1,000 people alone from companies like Google, Microsoft, Zalando, Swisscom, lots of international companies all over the world. And through the work that I've done, I realized that one of the biggest stressors for people is actually their productivity and their time. So in one-to-one conversations with my clients, I realized, okay, I need to help them with their productivity, because nobody really has taught us how to manage our time, how to set boundaries, how to create powerful schedules, how to set clear tasks to feel accomplished at the end of the day, and not continue to work at night and work in the evenings and weekends because we feel like there's always more to do, right? So I've basically, based on all of the experience that I've had, from all of the programs that I attended, but also through the work with my clients, I've built the peak performance method that basically is a combination of all of the most important tools that I've seen my clients need in order to move from stressed to empowered.
I love that. I love that you not only learned for yourself, but you took that and turned it into a system, into a business to impact a greater number of people, and share your learnings, your insights, and your gifts with others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm trying to. And I'm really passionate about it, and I think people can already probably tell by how I'm speaking about this. But, my biggest realization was that when I went back into the company, there were a lot of programs available when you were diagnosed with a mental health problem. But I asked myself, well, I've been here for 7.5 years and I've never heard somebody talk about this ever, right? So initially, when I went back, I actually shared this with a couple of other internal teams, because I was thinking to myself, well, I felt so guilty and so alone when I was going through this process, because nobody ever talks about it. You hear sometimes these whispers on the floor that somebody had a burnout, but you don't really know what that means,
Yes.
right? And you always think that you are not going to be the person that is going to be affected by this anyway. And so when I got back, I was really doing a lot of research as well. Okay, what kind of internal resources are actually available? And are we having any programs in place that help employees to prevent this from happening in the first place? Because now, and that goes a little bit into my book as well. So I started to write a book, and I've done with that, of course, a lot of research on statistics and literature on burnout and anxiety and depression. And I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. Like, there's, for example, 60% of tech employees feel burned out. 60%. That's a very, very high number. And people are aware of it, but I'm working with a lot of different tech global companies, and they don't really have preventive mental health programs in place. And that's really where I see myself come in, and where I hope to come in, because that's really what I'm passionate about, and where I want to help organizations, and of course then their individuals, understand how important it is, because we all always think that it's not going to affect us until it's too late, right? And that was my first experience in the first year in business as well, that I worked a lot with people that were already at the same stage that I was at, a year previous, like in a depression or anxiety or panic attacks, taking different kinds of medication to support their lifestyle, right? To kind of keep on doing what they were doing. And I want to really take even a step further and start helping people understand you have to start at the beginning of your employee's journey to prevent them from leaving the company. There are so many people. There's a statistic as well that says 40 or 50% of HR leaders know that people leave because they are burnt out, and yet there are still no preventive measures in place to help people learn and educate and train them on what can I actually do to take care of myself, and what can I do to manage my time, how can I be more productive and a more effective leader.
So important. What I wrote down here is that you're really giving voice to almost the voiceless sometimes, and also giving a voice to a subject that's typically taboo, if you will, just
Yeah, for sure.
swept under the rug.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't happen here, or if it
Mm-hmm.
does happen here, we don't necessarily want to acknowledge, or we just want to keep going, keep pumping it out.
Yeah,
And I think during this time of crisis, people are now starting to have those conversations of the psychological effects of the crisis. So I think it's coming more into the mainstream to have a
for sure.
conversation
Yeah.
about these very real effects that are happening um, in people's lives. So admire that, and that brings up a question for me about empowerment.
Mhm.
because through your work, you are empowering others in addition to empowering yourself. So, can you talk about that?
Yeah. I really see my work, I would say, as empowering other people to make changes in their life, because as you know as well, as a coach and consultant, we can't really we can inspire people and motivate people to make changes in their life, but at the end of the day, it's us ourselves that have to take that step, right? We have to make these choices for a better life, and so I'm trying to just be really authentic and hopefully inspirational by sharing my own story, to help people understand you can do this too. Like you have the power to make these decisions. And I think, one of the things that I talk a lot about, that I find it very fascinating, is that victim mindset. So, we oftentimes say, oh, that's just the way I am, or I just was brought up this way. And, mom and dad are responsible for like a shitty life that now I'm living, right? All of these different things. And um, I think that we can all make a choice. We all have the power to make choices, no matter what happened in our life at some point, no matter the bad experiences or the difficult times that we've had. That I don't want to, say that they were not important in our life to shape us into the person that we are today. But we can't, we can't live our life, or we can't extend or continue our life that way just because that's what happened to us. So I really see it more from a perspective of, okay, you need to, and I need to make choices in my life in order to create that healthier and that happier life for myself. Nobody else will do it for me. Nobody's going to take my hand and say, Julia, you should really do better, like take better care of yourself. You should really better manage your time and set boundaries with these people, right? Nobody will do that. And we have to take that responsibility. And if we strive to have a better life, we also need to make that decision to have that better life and start taking responsibility. So for me, empowerment really is to make choices and to take responsibility for my life choices in order to feel empowered, right? And that makes me be empowered, because then I'm making that decision, I'm making that choice to change something to what was maybe before and that wasn't optimal.
Yes, and I think what you're saying is it's about control. We have a lot of control
Mm-hmm.
over our thoughts, over what we eat, what we consume in terms of media and reading, what we decide, how we decide to exercise or not, or journal or not. Right? We have all of these powers within.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question for you about mentors and advocates, sponsors. You know, who have you had mentors throughout your career um, to and sponsors to help shape you and also can help you in supporting your journey that you are on now in terms
Mm-hmm.
of your entrepreneurial ventures?
Mm. Great question. I do get that question often, and I'm always almost a bit sad to say I don't really have a direct mentor or sponsor, because I wish I would have somebody that kind of helps me in certain ways. And I do have in like indirectly, I would say, I think that we again shape our own environment, we shape who we are, and so of course I'm looking for people that inspire me. So when I talk about more indirect inspiration, I'm talking about, for example, a German coach that I've been following for the last 3 to 4 years, and that has really almost empowered me through her own work, uh, to create this business, but also to learn about my own personal development. So she's been a very strong influence in my life over the last 3 to 4 years. I even think about books, like for example, I love Joe Dispenza. He talks about the neuroscience and the connection between thoughts, behaviors, and stress, and the stress response, and then of course the neuroscience of what's happening in our brain. And I find that so fascinating, and I love to consume his work for my own benefit, but then also for my own programs. And I do think of one mentor that I had during my time at Google. He was a manager, one of my first managers that I had, and we are still in touch. And he's just been such a wonderful coach and mentor to me over the last 8-9 years. In general, not specifically on building the business, but it's just somebody that I know is always in my corner, and that I could always reach out to if I have a question or if I feel down. And he has been always there. So yeah, he's definitely been very inspirational for me in terms of how I want to work with people, because he was such a wonderful leader and coach. Yeah.
That's terrific to know that you're supported and you have people that you can go to ask questions of. I think
Mhm.
sometimes, as an entrepreneur, you can feel lonely. It gets
Oh,
lonely at the
100%.
top.
Yeah. Hmm.
So to have that support network, even if it's not direct, but to know that there are resources that you can access is fantastic. So, in thinking over our conversation today, what is something that you would like our audience to take away and remember about our conversation today?
Mm. I think it's really, really important that you start to think about how you live your life, and that you know that you have the power to change it. That whatever is in your life at the moment that you're not happy with, that it's really important to change that, and to understand, um, to understand yourself rather than making your external environments responsible for it. The reason why I'm saying this is that oftentimes I get people that come to me at an almost burned out stage, and they say, I need to change careers, I need to change my job. And because I have that stress management lens, I often then kind of poke a little bit into, okay, how much time have you been taking for yourself? How have you been managing your time at work? How you're managing your schedule, how much self-care time do you actually have throughout the day? And then oftentimes the answer is, I haven't done this. I have not spent any time for myself. I haven't really filled my cup. And I always say to people, well, before you change your job, you should think about how you can create healthier, better habits, because even if you leave your job and you're going to another company, you're still the same person, and you're still
Mhm.
going to have these habits, and you're going to get to the same point again in another company as well, because it's you. So this is really an encouragement for people to start thinking about how can they deliver peak performance on a sustainable level every day. It's not, we all want to be successful, and we all want to be performant on a hopefully for a very long period of time. But the way of how we are almost using and misusing our system, our nervous system, our brains, and our bodies is not sustainable. And maybe today you don't feel it, and maybe today you think you are healthy, but from my experience working with people, most of the people I've worked with can use some help, or can make some improvements in their life in order to really create a more sustainable peak performance.
Speaking of peak performance, can
Mm.
you give us a few tips, at least tease us with a few tips about particularly time management and taking control of our schedules?
Mhm. Yeah. Um, okay, maybe 2 or 3 tips on how to improve productivity at work, right? So I think one of the things, especially, let's talk about the coronavirus specifically, right?
Yes.
A lot of people are telling me at the moment, oh, there's no transition anymore between home and work life. I just feel like I'm constantly connected, even more so now than before. I'm never really transitioning. I'm always, my thoughts are always with work. The computer is always there, and I can open it and check it. So setting boundaries, starting with being really clear on your start and end hours of your workday. really important, because we don't do that. We just think we can just juggle everything, right? Especially when we maybe have some kids at home. We think, oh, I'll just do it all simultaneously. People won't know that I'm doing this and I'm doing that, but then it puts a lot of pressure on ourselves. So being really smart about your schedule and communicating really clear beginning and end hours of your workday for yourself, but also to your stakeholders, can be a really powerful tool to reduce that stress and pressure that a lot of people are feeling right now. The second thing is that we forget that we control our calendars. I think oftentimes we think that the calendar is controlling us, and that's just how it is. And that was a really powerful learning for me as an entrepreneur as well, because I was in that habit of, I just fill my schedule with whatever. Like when people come and ask me, I'll just give them whatever dates I have available and times that I have available, to shifting to no, like I'm building my schedule. So now I'm available to meetings and podcast interviews maybe 2 or 3 times or 2 or 3 days a week. And on the other 1 or 2 days, I do not schedule any meetings, because I don't want to have meetings all day long. I don't think it's very productive, and it doesn't help me to move forward. And then people hear me say that and they're like, no, that's just not possible. Like I have these conversations with people, and I'm like, well, I'll challenge you to try it out, because you control your calendar. Again, like, are you going to get yourself controlled by the external world, or are you going to take that control and that power back, right? Self-empowerment. And then the last thing I would say, especially talking about Corona, but also just in general, is the work to home transition. I think, what we often forget is we work all day, and we have a certain mental capacity, we have willpower and attentiveness, right? And that decreases over the day. So, and that's where routines come in as well. So in the evenings, when we are finishing with work and we work 8, 9, 10 hours a day, we are mentally exhausted and drained. And it's really hard then to be like, okay, now I'm going to go outside and do something active, right? Because all we want to do is to sit down on the couch, watch some Netflix or something, to just kind of switch off from all of the things that we've been doing over the day. And we probably eat something as well. And I always say, you can still do that, but do me a favor and go outside for at least 20 to 30 minutes, because what you've been doing over the last 8, 9, 10 hours is you've been sitting in front of your screen on your butt for 8 or 9 or 10 hours. And when you're moving to the living room and you keep doing that, you're sitting in front of a screen. You're not changing that environment, and you're not decreasing your stress levels, which is incredibly important to kind of switch off and not have that constant thought of like, oh, maybe there's one more thing that I can do. Maybe I'll open my laptop again. Oh, there, we have like these thoughts that pop up in our mind. Oh, maybe I need to check on this, because I don't know if I've actually responded to that properly, or maybe they have already responded to my email, right? And then we are just getting into that cycle of doing more and doing more and doing more, and taking less and less care of ourselves. Because for me, sitting on the couch watching Netflix is not really self-care. Let's definitely be very clear on that. So those are a couple of things that I'm teaching and helping my clients implement in their day-to-day life.
And that is so very insightful and helpful. And in fact, on a recent program I was moderating, somebody made this statement that sitting has become the new smoking in terms of a bad habit.
Mm-hmm.
So that advice about, getting up, going outside, being active, if it's just walking around a little bit, you're switching up the energy and getting out of that sitting habit.
Exactly.
So, Julian, wrapping up, I want to make sure that people can find you. So, what are the ways that people can find you?
Yeah, so my website is peakperformancemethod.com. That's where, of course, that's kind of the hub of all of the other links that they can probably access. But I do have a podcast, as you mentioned at the beginning. It's called Stressed, Develop Your Next Workplace Superpower. That's available on iTunes, on Spotify, also on YouTube, because all of my podcasts that I'm recording them not only sound, but also video. And with that, my YouTube channel is growing. I have over over 150 videos on YouTube, not just podcasts, but also informational videos on all of the different tools that I'm teaching my clients. So definitely make sure to check out the YouTube channel as well, that you can find under my name, Julia Arndt. Yeah.
Wonderful. So I'm just going to repeat that. You can find Julia at peakperformancemethod.com. Her podcast is called Stressed with the first E and leave out the second
Mm-hmm.
E,
Mm-hmm.
which is on iTunes, YouTube, and Spotify. And check out her YouTube channel under Julia Arndt. Thank you so much for being such a wonderful guest today. And to our audience, we appreciate you tuning in to this conversation and look forward to our next conversation. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you so much,
Welcome.
Susan. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.